Welcome to Mastering Local Marketing. My name is Matt Hansen, and in this episode, we're going to explore the crucial role of logos in your local marketing strategy. A logo isn't just a design, it's a powerful tool that can significantly influence your marketing efforts. We're going to dive into how exceptional branding goes beyond visuals to tell your unique story, connect with the local audience emotionally, and strengthen your overall marketing impact. From colors that evoke feelings to hidden design elements that convey your mission, every detail matters when building a memorable brand for your small business in your community. Join us as we discuss actionable insights on leveraging your logo for better local marketing outcomes. And I am here today with one of my dear friends, Matt Valukas from V as in Victor. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
No, anytime. So Matt is one of the most creative individuals that I know, and we've done some work in the past together. And he has got the one of the most unique brands that I know, and his company is called V as in Victor. And most people kind of question what is that, and that's the beauty of what Matt has done. He has created a creative agency, which is actually you've expanded beyond that, but we can get into that. But Matt has created this creative agency that gets people talking, and I want to talk to him today about logos and branding. And Matt, how are you? How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you. No, it's funny though that you bring up branding and the name of my company, because sometimes your brand just evolves over time. Like for me specifically, V as in Victor is how I spell my last name. My last name is Valukas. So my parents always spelled it V as in Victor, Aluckis. And I remember back in college when I was just freelancing, I hadn't even thought about starting my own business. I hadn't thought about anything. I just needed a name to kind of freelance under. And it was like spur of the moment. And I was like, V as in Victor works because, it's unique to me, to my family. Let's keep that going. And here it is, literally like 35 years later, and I'm still using that name, and it's kind of evolved from all of that. Where I know for a lot of brands, there's a lot of time and thought that goes into naming and your logo and things like that. And for me, it was literally a split second decision when I was like 16 years old to freelance under a name. Um, so I love that it kind of resonates with people. But it's also funny because when people talk to me, they're like they will call me Victor instead of Matt because V as in Victor is the name of it. That like the Victor part sticks. So it's almost kind of created this own persona in itself, which is kind of funny to me.
And it's funny because before we got on today, our producer goes, "Well, I have a Victor on Zoom today," and I
See?
go, "Well, it's Matt." And
Yeah.
and it's funny that you say V as in Victor because even with myself, my last name is Hansen, and I always say Hansen with an O. So I guess I could start an agency going with that. But
Yeah.
um, you had I talk to many people around, and I always say Matt Valukas, V as in Victor, and they're like, "Oh yeah, V as in Victor, I know that one," and it's just sticks in their mind. So it's so unique that you know you get all of these different names throughout your area, and it's so unique and it's so different that it just stands out. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk about today is how do we go about doing that. And when we're looking at logos, a lot of people will just kind of put a logo together with relatively no thought behind it. And I know I've sat with you, I know we've had conversations about clients and things like that. So can you kind of walk us through what that path is? What do you when you sit down with somebody and you first have these conversations in regard to a logo or branding? Where do you take them? Like, walk us through that process.
I I have a process that I've kind of put together over the last couple of decades, and I call it my 20 questions. And for me, when it comes down to your logo, your look, your brand, it's very subjective. And when you are starting your own business, you are very, very close to it. It's an emotional thing. It's almost like your child at a certain point. Um, and to get into that mindset can be difficult. So what I have found is by using our 20 questions, it there in there there are 10 left brain questions and there's 10 right brain questions, and some of those left brain questions are research portions of it. Do you have a mission statement? Do you have a vision statement? What can we pull from those particular things? Some of the questions are, what's your elevator pitch? Because what you're saying to somebody in the simplest of terms makes the most sense. For me, it's conversational and it's about connecting with people. And how do we get people to to buy into your brand, to understand it the way that you do. Because ultimately, as the business owner, as the decision maker, you want on your staff 20 clones of you who can do what you do, who understand it the way that you understand it, and can take that brand and put it forward. So it's asking those questions to get inside your head as an owner to understand what it is that you want people to understand. So some of those questions are, we talked about your elevator pitch, but if you have to kind of take your business down to one word, what is that word? And what's interesting about when we ask these questions is the elevator pitch is very informative. It's what you want people to know about what you do. But when we ask people to define their business in one word, it's usually an action verb or it's an adjective. And usually one of those two words has nothing to do with the sentence or the elevator pitch that they've given us. But it's great because it gives us now an emotion and an action kind of take forward with the brand of what they want to do with that. And then one of the things that we love to do with our clients is talk to them about their competition. Do they have any? What do they like about what they do? Like, what do they feel like that competition is hitting the market really, really well in this? Or their tagline is fantastic, or their color scheme. One of the examples I use all the time is Target versus Walmart. Target and Walmart are essentially the same store. They're selling the same products at the same price point. But when you walk into their stores, they're very different feels. Walmart has a big box feel. There's a lot of fluorescent lights and high ceilings. Target, you walk in and it's warm reds and warm browns and it's lower ceilings and the lighting is a little bit warmer in there. It feels more like a department store. So what we're able to do with these 20 questions is kind of dive into how you want the market to see your business and then take your brand and your logo to start the creation of that from ground zero.
It's interesting that you say the comparison, right? So looking at your competition. Um, Again, I was working on a logo for something that I'm doing last week, and the first thing that I did was I went out and found the competition and I put them all on a single page so I could look at them, right? And I wanted to understand fonts and colors and what they were trying to get across. And the way that I look at it is literally I need something that's going to break the mold. So,
Mhm.
whether it is a logo, whether it's the cover art for this podcast, which we've done as well, we recently changed it, and it was literally comparing it against other podcasts. But I think that stems. We had done a campaign years ago in the juice aisle, and basically we were looking at the juice aisle, and everything looks the exact same, right? It's bright colors, it's multicolors. There's nothing that really stands out versus the other one, and we were realizing that you need to break out of that. If it's multicolor and it's bright, you need one static color that kind of stands out, or one bold color that is big instead of kind of all these little smaller colors all mixed in. So, from your perspective, obviously you're comparing it to other competitors. I mean, you've got a variety of things to look at. You've got typography, you've got color. I mean, how do you approach that? Is there something when it comes to the typography, the fonts that you really enjoy? You feel that there's certain things that people should look at. I don't want to bring up the Comic Sans, right? It's an old joke that's been used way too much. But, is there something that you would recommend to our listeners to kind of stay away from, or kind of, a certain font style that you believe they should pay attention to, or trends that are going on today?
That's kind of a loaded question because it really depends on the client and the product or service that they're providing. Um, One of the things that, again, going back to my 20 questions that I really, really love about it is that one of the last questions that I will ask is what well-known personality or celebrity would use your product? And this is an older reference, but back when Brangelina was a thing, with Brad and Angel, I'm spacing on her name.
Angelina
Anyway,
Jolie.
Brangelina.
Yep, yep.
So, but a client had said to me, she is the one, Angelina Jolie, there we go. She is the one that would use my product. And when you get an idea in your head of that's the audience that you want to go after, we're able to kind of craft our messaging around that. So sometimes it's listening to the client to say, this is the audience that we want to hit. And if we're in the orange juice aisle and all of them are aimed at kids and things like that, but they want a more elegant feel to it, then suddenly we're not necessarily looking at what the competition is doing. We're looking at that field of elegant design to say, where would this look, how would this look like if Angelina Jolie opened up her fridge and this was sitting next to the Tropicana. How do we design accordingly? The other thing that's really, really interesting when we're talking about how to kind of break through that mold of it is taking a look at how the audience is using your product as it exists. And when we're talking logo and branding, there's essentially two different audiences. There's a product or solution that's been created from scratch and they don't have an audience yet, but they want to break into an area. Or you're probably maybe you're doing a rebrand on an existing product, but you want that rebrand to cut through that clutter of all of those orange bottles that are sitting on the shelf with the orange juice and things like that. So sometimes the question comes down to a client is the product that you have and the audience that you have, are they connecting? And if they're connecting, let's not mess with that too much because you have a defined audience that already sits there. But let's say that you are finding out that the people that are using your product aren't the intended audience that you thought, that there's a little side audience for that. Let's take a look at that audience and where they exist and then shift the design to meet them where they are. So it's kind of a bigger question than, looking at fonts and colors and things like that, because it's more about knowing the audience that you want to hit, and making sure that you are focusing on what breaks through to them. Now, there are cases where the audience that you want to hit already exists. So you're Tropicana and you want to exist in that world. You want to hit the families, you want to hit the, weekend breakfast crowd. Um, when you're looking at something like that, when it comes to design, again, it's so interesting because it is subjective. And there are people that love focus groups and there are people that hate focus groups because sometimes the focus group can reinforce, the look of what you're going for. Sometimes it can completely distract and completely pull it apart, and where you thought you were going isn't where you should be. But I think the wonderful thing about that is that there's always nuggets that you can kind of pull when you're showcasing a design and kind of taking it out in front of people. But I think that the biggest mistake a lot of clients make is that they already have an idea in their head of what they want. And I think letting go of that idea to know that you are bringing in an expert for a field that they're really, really good at is important. But sometimes, and I'm sure you've had this several times, where you design something and a client is so kind of hell bent on it. They've already got an idea in their mind of what they want to do with that, that they're unwilling to let go of that. So it's not always just the design aspect of it. Sometimes it's the education portion of it to gaining their trust to know that you want to break through the clutter and the idea that you have in your mind sits right in the middle of that clutter. We need to kind of break out. So there's an education and handholding that comes with that too, that's beyond logos and colors and things like that, but they do work hand in hand.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Again, lots of people come in with these ideas of where they want to see things going, and I always say, you know, there are experts out there for a reason. Listen to them. Don't be closed off. And we've had clients through the years that don't want to listen and whatever, and I get it. You mentioned though that earlier we were talking about the difference between Target and Walmart, and I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and they were talking to the guy that helped launch Method and Ollie. And Method, the way that they were discussing it was he walks through Target or he walks through Walmart and he starts to understand what's going on in the aisle. And what he says is basically, especially with Method, it was more that it was you use, soap, and 9 times out of 10 it's just sitting there on your counter. You're not really using it. But their approach with that was on the branding side was literally, we need to make this something that somebody wants to look at, right? So it's not this ugly soap bottle that nobody wants to have on their counter. It's a little bit more design. And they were talking about how they will literally go out and look at architecture, and they'll take their design teams out to understand textures in buildings and anything that they do, and they bring that back into their branding because they realize that there are things that people want to look at and there are things that people don't want to look at. So from a branding perspective, they've created this brand, which is a billion-dollar brand at this point, and they're incorporating the likability, the ability, that people want to visually look at things that are pretty instead of something that's ugly on their counter. So, you know, from that point, I think that's what we're kind of talking about here is we've got a logo, we've got branding, but where does it need to fit into the lifestyle of your consumer? And there are a variety of consumers. I mean, there's people that are just looking for soap, and then there are people that are looking for a really elaborate bottle, a really elaborate kind of brand that speaks to who they are. Um, I thought it was interesting, and it was just kind of, he's always looking for the next brand, and that's basically how he does it. Is he walks through and he compares all the competition, and he looks at the colors and he looks at the packaging, and that's kind of how he's built all these different brands. So I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I think you hit on something really interesting there, is that there's a big difference between designing to design and designing for a solution in mind. Most of us in the field, we love art. That's why we got into it. We're creative people. But ultimately, branding is to solve a problem. It's not art for art's sake. It's how do we create something bigger than us, but it solves that problem. And one of the things that I often talk to my clients about is there's a benefit to the benefit. So the benefit is that you need soap, you need to be clean. But the benefit beyond that is you smell better, your skin looks better, it's not as oily. Because of that, you feel better about yourself. You feel more confident. So the benefit of using this particular soap is you're going to go out feeling radiant. You have more confidence about you. You feel like you're going to have a better day. You're in a better mood because your confidence is higher. There are benefits to using that product. And I think solid marketing really looks at that aspect of it, is that you're not selling a product, you're selling a lifestyle, you're selling an experience. That's huge with that. And then the second point that you made that I think is incredibly important is that a lot of products are designed to be kept around. I am incredibly guilty of just about every iPad, iPhone, MacBook that I've ever bought. I still have the boxes for. I don't need those boxes. Those boxes don't work for anything. I feel like if I ever want to sell my iPhone, I'm going to sell it with the box because that's where it goes. But I was listening to a podcast a while back that was talking about the way that Apple designs their products. They have a team put together that when that box closes, it's fit just enough that it kind of closes slowly, and you get that sense of satisfaction as it kind of like shutters itself down. There's an entire world around that product design that kind of builds that experience to it all. But that is bigger than just your brand. Again, it's your user experience that you're giving to them. And when you think about building your brand, building your logo, there's a culture that surrounds that that is so much bigger than just the look of that logo that you see on everything. But again, it's difficult for a small business to do that because sometimes you're one person or you're three people and you're running the business and you're working on your billing and you're working on your marketing and how do we make sure that we pay the utilities this month. On a small business scale, it's not the easiest to do that, which is why it's wonderful to have an agency that can come to your aid and kind of be your partner working alongside with you to help build that experience as you are building your business and your brand with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Let's change gears a little bit. One of the things that, well, actually, I should say my wife keeps all of the packaging as well, and I'm always the one like we can throw these away because all we're doing is trading the phones or the iPads or whatever in for the next model. So I don't know why we keep them, but that's another that's another side discussion that we can have. But one of the things that I love about branding is companies that will embed certain things into their logos, right? So, the Cubs are playing the Brewers right now. My favorite logo with the embedded kind of
Is it
messaging
the Brewers logo where it
is
looks like the mitt, but it's the M and the B in there?
I love that is my favorite logo of all time. I'm sorry, Cubs fans, but like I'm just saying from
No, from
from
a branding standpoint,
from a
yeah, it's
branding
beautiful.
standpoint, it is gorgeous. It is has tested, time and it's just perfect, right? But there are other ones out there. We've got, Baskin Robbins has the 31 flavors, the 31 that is embedded in the logo. We've got Amazon with the little smile and
From the A to
from
Z,
A
the
to Z,
arrow.
right?
Yep.
So there are all these wonderful little things that you can hide in your logos. And I don't know, if you can be that creative and embed those types of things into your logos, I think that just speaks volumes to the creativity of the company.
Mhm.
So,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
No, it's one of my favorite things. If you can create a little something um, that isn't noticeable at first. But when you kind of glance at it, you wonder, was that an intentional thing that they did when they designed that out, or was that just kind of a mistake that I'm seeing? Like, am I, crossing my eyes too much and I'm seeing the sailboat in the menage of, shapes and patterns and things like that. Honestly, one of my favorite ones locally, and I'm a little biased on this because they're one of our clients, but I love them, is Humane, Indiana. And they did a rebrand about 7 or 8 years ago. And I wasn't part of this rebrand, and I really wish that I was. But their logo is a cat and a dog and a bird, because for Humane Indiana, they have their animal shelter, which adopts dogs and cats, but they also have Humane Indiana Wildlife out in Valparaiso. And that part of the organization takes in wildlife that have been injured, and they rehabilitate them and release them back into the wild, into nature. But in the center of their logo is a bird, and the bird itself is a cardinal for the state of Indiana. But the bird itself, if you look at the logo, is actually the state of Indiana with the cutout for Northwest Indiana where the lake is. But it's really great because if you look at it the right way, there's a dog that's on the left-hand side. And that state bird in Indiana is actually also the ear of the dog. So it's like this triple use logo that has these fun little things built into it that the more that you look at it, you're like, I didn't notice that the first time. So I absolutely love when brands do something like that. Like on the international level, Toblerone, the bear that's in there in the mountain of that is just fantastic. But I think one of the nice things about a logo like that is you can tell that the designer and the brand gave some serious thought to that. It wasn't just, we're an ice cream shop, so let's throw an ice cream cone up there.
Yeah.
31 flavors with Baskin Robbins found a way to turn the 31 into their B and R for Baskin Robbins. That there was a thought process behind it, and it wasn't just going with that first idea. They were like, the first idea is okay. Now that we have a solid idea, let's really play with it and see what fun we can have.
Yeah. And many times what happens is people start and they build the logo and they're like, it's good enough. But I think, from a creative standpoint, um, we're just talking about the Brewers logo. We're talking about Amazon. We're talking about, all these different ones. But there's some piece to that just says, this company takes that extra step to embody who they are. Another one that we didn't mention was FedEx, right? So there's
Oh, the arrow. Yeah.
the arrow in the FedEx. So, maybe we're blowing some people's minds today and they're going to go look at all these logos. But, this is what we routinely see, or where you see the white space is actually creating something into the logo. And, so it's not there, like there's nothing there, but it's actually creating something because the rest of the logo is kind of calling it out. So
Absolutely.
there's a bunch of different things we could talk about that. So, all right, to kind of wrap things up, one other thing that I want to talk about is a lot of people will follow trends, right? So they get into in logo design, you see a lot of trends. So this year may be one thing, and last year was something else. What's your thought on that?
Trends are so interesting to me because they're organic. There's no one person that's like, this year we're going to focus on this particular thing. Um, we were speaking earlier about the Apple products, and about a week and a half ago, I upgraded to the new iOS on my iPhone. And what's really, really interesting is that we're moving away from flat logos into gradients and shading and things like that. And I remember back in the early 2000s, that was called Web 2.0. It was those looks of everything being bubbled and gel and things like that. And here it is 20 years later, and it's new and it's fresh again. But in that regard, somebody decided, hey, this kind of looks really cool. And somebody else looked at that and like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen something like that. Or they're young enough that they didn't remember that it became a thing. Or conversely, somebody looked at something old and they're like, this is really cool. I can take what this is and I can snowball it and make it newer with what we've been doing lately. But trends to me are, I do keep an eye on them. I do. But the thing about a trend is that because it's a trend, if it leaves, if it's trendy for 6 months and you're basing your entire design on that trend, it's great for a campaign
Mm-hmm.
because your campaign can change every 6 months, every 2 years, whenever you want it to. I'm a big fan of trends, but using them in a way that is not something that's going to be completely permanent. When you're talking about your overall brand look, your fonts, your colors, I like to look beyond the next 2 or 3 years. This is still something that ideally is going to look good in 10 years or so. And most companies these days kind of rebrand around that every 10 or 15 years, it seems. But really, as much as I love trends, I tend to focus on them more for campaigns, something that runs for 6, 8, 12, 18 months, and then we can kind of shift because you need to be mindful of, because that trend will change. What's your audience paying attention to? You don't want to be locked into something that looks really good right now, but 2 years down the line, you're like, ooh, that's really cringeworthy. We shouldn't have gone that route.
Agree 100%, right? So, all right. So this is Matt Valukas. Where can they find you? Where can they find V as in Victor?
You can find at vasinvictor.com. So that'd be vasinvictor.com. We're also on Facebook. You can also hit me up at Matt, METT, at vasinvictor.com.
So I can attest Matt is a fabulous designer. I've seen tons of work. I have sung his praises for years. So if you're looking for a logo, you're looking for some help, give Matt a call. All right, that is the episode of today. Matt, I want to say thank you again for being with us. Always a pleasure. And until next time, we will see you guys later.